Tracer in the tank, Airblast. This section contains stories about a real pesticide application that included fluorescent tracer. The stories demonstrate PPE failure, as well as work practices, behaviors, and environmental conditions that resulted in skin and clothing contamination. Using tracer enabled handlers to identify and develop solutions for problems discovered during the process. A standard pesticide application took place in an eastern Washington orchard. Fluorescent tracer was added to the pesticide container before mixing and loading. The orchard was sprayed according to the pesticide label over a 4-hour session. The handlers who participated were volunteers and either mixer loaders or applicators. All volunteers were provided black clothes to wear under their PPE because it's easier to see tracer on dark clothing. Detailed instructions for using tracer during an application can be found in the Fluorescent Tracer Manual. During the application, PNASH staff observed the session and took notes on routine and non-routine activities. Wind and temperature were also noted. These observations were helpful when trying to understand how the fluorescent tracer contaminated skin or clothing. It was an important part of the process when developing solutions to prevent future contamination. Routine activities to observe include mixing, loading, and applying pesticides, removal and decontamination of PPE, and cleaning of spray equipment. Non-routine activities to observe may include adjusting, repairing, and maintaining application equipment, water or bathroom breaks, eating, and the use of cell phones and radios. After the application was complete, volunteers removed their PPE and cleaned it as they normally would. The handlers then gathered in the dark area and took turns under black light, where they discovered the tracer results and discussed possible solutions. Here are some of those stories. A leaky seam. An applicator who had been given a new jacket reported that the neck of his shirt was wet, which could easily have been dismissed as perspiration. Throughout the application, he was observed properly wearing his PPE, yet when he took his turn under the black light, a clear band of tracer showed up around his neck. The tracer showed that even with proper PPE use, his clothing was contaminated. The other applicators in the group suggested looking at the jacket seams. A close examination showed that even though the jacket was new, the seam seal along the neckline was faulty and had failed. The employer's response was to immediately check the other jackets. Replacements were ordered the same day. What's the message? Tracers can be used to identify PPE failures. Something up your sleeve? Under black light, a mixer loader showed substantial fluorescent tracer on his sleeve. He was surprised that there was contamination inside his PPE. The group was able to use this opportunity to discuss their work practices. They realized that while he was wearing the proper gloves and PPE, water and pesticide ran down his glove and onto his sleeve when he rinsed the pesticide container. During this action, he would reach up and empty the container into the spray tank. Another handler mentioned hearing about a special way to duct tape the gloves to the jacket sleeves to prevent liquids from getting in. In this case, the tracer illuminated an unexpected route of potential exposure and allowed the handler to take actions to protect himself. The Fluorescent Tracer Manual has instructions for taping sleeves, a method recommended by the WSDA. What's the message? Tracers allow individuals and groups to identify unknown exposures and help solve the problem. It's a cinch. During application, observers noticed that one of the applicators had his hood open at the neck, unlike the others who had cinched it tight around their faces. Because his hood was loose and open, we wanted to look at his neck under the black light. Results showed exposure on the applicator's neck. In this photo, the outline of his well-fitting, full-face respirator is clearly defined. Why was this handler exposed? At this point, observers' records became very important. The observer noted that not only was the applicator's hood open and loose around his face, but at times, the wind blew from behind the sprayer onto the applicator. During discussion in the dark area, the applicator pointed out that if his hood was too tight, then he could not turn his head around far enough to the side to see and check his sprayer. A potential solution would be to provide a larger jacket or one with a roomier hood. Other handlers pointed out that the full-face respirator did a good job of protecting his face. What's the message? Tracers can help determine what actions and environmental conditions may lead to potential exposure. They can also show when safety measures work well. Sit down and take notice. One applicator, concerned about pesticide exposure, noticed that a crack in the tractor seat cover could allow the foam pad inside to soak up spray. To solve the problem, he put a sheet of cardboard on the seat to protect it. After spraying, he looked at his PPE under the black lights to see if his solution was effective. Results showed that the cardboard was soaking up and holding pesticides against the lower portion of his PPE. This surprised the handler. As a temporary measure, he securely attached a large plastic bag over the seat until the seat could be replaced. What's the message? Tracers can help identify if solutions are working as anticipated. Improper PPE removal. Before handlers and applicators went into the dark area, they removed their PPE as they usually do. Under black light, one handler saw a pattern on the front of his sweatshirt. Discussion led the group to the conclusion that he had removed his jacket by grabbing the inside of the front flaps, rather than pulling at the front of the jacket. The pattern on his shirt was created by contamination on the fingers of his gloves. Even though he had washed his gloves, they were contaminated again when he touched the jacket. Further discussion led to 2 points. First, PPE needs to be rinsed before it's removed, and second, that clean items should only touch clean items, and dirty or contaminated items should only touch dirty items. Everyone in the group realized that the clothing they wore underneath their PPE can easily be contaminated, and that it must be handled at all times as if it has pesticides on it. Handlers and applicators should store and wash clothing apart from their family's laundry, and they should never wear work clothes more than once without washing. What's the message? Tracers can show how a single action can contaminate clothing. What is tracer? What is not? Several things can be mistaken as tracer contamination, such as lint and soap products that contain brighteners. If necessary, use a lint brush to remove as much lint as possible. Dry skin and calloused hands, sunscreen, some lotions, and makeup powder can also appear to glow under black light. Check for this ahead of time. Light or white-colored clothing and worn-out jeans will also glow. Try to use dark or black clothing. Always view fabric ahead of time to make sure it does not glow.